edition of our Kosher Curiosities class here on a Thursday night. As we normally do, we get together and we learn different halachot of kashrut. We've been speaking the last couple of weeks over the laws of milk and meat, basar bechalav, and we are going to kind of end this session a little bit with a discussion on household utensils and appliances, more specifically that of sinks, dishwashers, ovens, and microwaves. Very often used appliances in our homes. Do we require meat and milk dishwashers or meat and milk ovens, meat and milk sinks? Are these necessary? And what does Rabbi Melamed have to say about this? Again, we are learning from his Sefer Peninei Halacha. And without further ado, we are just going to begin. We are on chapter 25, Halacha Yud Bet, where he talks about the dinim of kiorim and madiach kelim, which are sinks and dishwashers. Noagim latkin shne kiorim. The custom is to have two sinks, echad lenikui kelim chalaviim, ve'echad lenikui kelim besarim, to clean milk dishes on one and meat dishes on the other. Some people even have the custom to have countertops designated for milk, v'tzad sheni lemachalei basar, and another countertop on the other side designated for meat. Machalei parva efshar leachin b'shnei chalkei hashaish ubitnai shashaish naki, and a person can prepare parv foods on either one of those countertops as long as the countertop is clean. B'shat hatzorech, in times of need, efshar leishtamesh bekior echad, a person can even use one sink. V'shaish echad, on one countertop, lishnei minim, for both. Ubitnai shakpidu lenakot hakior ve'ashaish misharei machalim b'min lemin. As long as a person ensures that the sinks are clean and the countertops are clean, then he can prepare food of the other kind on that. So, is it necessary to have two sinks? No. But just make sure that a person that you clean in between. Necessary to have two sets of countertops, one for meat, one for milk? No. Just make sure that a person that you're cleaning the countertop properly. Noagim leached matliot karsuf. A person, as we generally have the custom to have two different types of scrubbing cloths, nifradot, separately, lechalavi ulbesari, for both milk and meat. Omnam, however, mitzad hadin, according to the halacha, kol zman sheme'arvim imamayim savon, as long as you mix soap in the water, mutar lekatzef be'ota matlit kelim b'serim chalavim, you're allowed to use the same scrubbing cloth. Whoa, this is a big chidush for a lot of people. Yes, you can use the same scrubber for meat and milk because sheken sabon pogem et ta'amei machalim. The soap actually impairs the taste of any meat or milk that's in that cloth, and therefore shekvar enam nechshavim b'sarim chalavim. You cannot even consider it meat or milk anymore because that's what the soap does. This halacha, it makes it very important halacha. The soap makes something pagum, and therefore you can use the same scrubber to clean your meat and milk dishes. However, we know many people have the custom to have two separate scrubbers, especially that they are very inexpensive. So that is with regards to the sinks. What about the dishwasher? So he wants to say his halacha is that you can use the dishwasher for both meat and milk as long as they are after one another. So you first use it for meat, then use it for milk. Because we're worried that maybe the flavors of meat and milk will get mixed together before the soap actually kicks in. Again, because if the soap kicks in, then there's nothing to talk about. We're going to get to that in a moment. Some people are more strict to buy two trays for the dishwasher. A tray for meat and a tray for milk, in order to keep the separation between the two types of dishes. Some people just say, no, dishwasher, I want it to be meat. End of story. Some you have two dishwashers, one for meat, one for milk. However, according to the law, a person can use the same dishwasher and the same tray, once for meat and once for milk on separate occasions. So this is the perfect opportunity to bring up the famous psak of Rav Ovadia and Yabia Omer, where he actually says that a person is allowed to use a dishwasher both for meat and milk at the same time. Yes, that you heard correct, at the same time, because he holds that the soap will enter right away, and right when the soap enters, as we mentioned, it impairs all the flavor of the food, and there is nothing to worry about. As long as you clean the dishes with from big particles of food as best as you can. You put in the dishwasher. He says that is enough. The soap will impair the flavor, so you could use meat and milk at the same time. There are not many rabbis that hold of this. Most poskim hold that you could use the same dishwasher, just not at the same time. But Rav Ovadia is famous for this psak, to say that the soap impairs the food and therefore it is mutar. And there are those people that wish to act strictly and have two separate dishwashers, or just designate the dishwasher for one. We are bringing down the halacha. We see what the Pnina halacha, Rav Melamed seems to hold the middle opinion. I am, for one, I tell my congregants or people that ask me that it is mutar to use dishwasher even at the same time based on Rav Avadia's ruling, and as long as a person cleans off the plates well and there is not a lot of big residue that can pose a problem. So therefore, that is the laws with regards to a dishwasher. What about stove? A person can use the stovetop, the element, for both meat and milk. Even if a little bit of meat splashed on the stovetop or milk splashed on the stovetop, the fire is so hot it instantly burns everything that is spilled. And therefore, again, it impairs any flavor. Same thing with electric stovetops or ceramic stovetops. You can put meat pot on it and then a dairy pot on it right after the other, because the heat of the element burns whatever would fall. If at the same time you are using one element for meat and one element for milk, try to make sure that there's some space in between the two pots, that they're not touching each other. What we don't want is a little bit of meat to splash onto the dairy pot that is sitting next to it. If they happen to touch each other, the meat and the milk pot, while they were on the fire, that as long as there was no liquid or I guess splash meat or anything that would spill, any liquid that is combining the two, in that situation, everything is kosher. The pots are kosher, the food is kosher, nothing to worry about, because the taste does not transfer when the pots are dry. Only when the pots are wet with some sort of liquid, that's when taste will transfer. Now, if there was some sort of liquid in between the pots and they touched each other, for example, one of them you're making meat sauce and the meat spilled and now touched the dairy pot. You should know that the food is kosher between the pots. However, now the pots need to be kosher. So to keep that in mind. Some people are machmir not to eat any food that fell underneath the element or on the glass in between the elements or the metal piece underneath the element. Sometimes so much food falls over there, you could have some meat and milk being mixed. And a big thick piece fell over there. You can kind of just skim off 2 centimeters worth on the part that fell on the metal part, and then eat the rest. Now, if you know that you really clean that part well, and there's no mixing of any of the two kinds going on, then you could eat what fell there. We're only worried about any type of grease that was there from before. We're not worried about really if something was absorbed in the metal and then now is emitting from that metal. Similarly, if dairy product fell onto there, and you know that from the last time you cleaned that metal base, there was no meat cooking whatsoever, then the dairy food that may have fell on there is kosher. Tanur afia is ovens. Minhag Yisrael lebatzer hafrada ben basar chalav. The minhag of the Jewish people is to strengthen the separation of meat and milk. ועל פי זה נוהגים רבים לקנות תנור עם שני תאים. There are people that buy ovens with two compartments. ולייחד אחד לבשרי ואחד לחלבי, and separate one for meat and one for milk. או לקנות תנור עם תה אחד ולייחדו לאחר המינים בלבד, or to buy an oven with one compartment and then just decide that's going to be meat and this one's going to be milk. ורוצה להשתמש באותו תה, a person wants to use that same compartment, פעם לבשרי ופעם בחלבי, רשאי, he is allowed to. ובתנאי שתהיה לו תבנית מיוחדת לבשרי ותבנית מיוחדת לחלבי, as long as the person has separate trays where you're going to put the food on for meat and milk. ויקפיד להכשיר אותו במעבר בין שני המינים על ידי חימום התנור למשך כחצי שעה על חום הגבוה ביותר. But a person should be מקפיד to kosher the oven in between the two meat and milk for a half an hour at a very high temperature. נוהגים גם לנקותו לפני כן. Some people have the custom to even clean them. clean the ovens in between. ואף המהדרים שלא להשתמש באותו תה שבתנור פעם בשרי ופעם בחלבי. And those people that are strict not to do so, רשאים בשעת הצורך לעשות כן, if they really need to, they can. רבים נוהגים, many have the custom, שכאשר רוצים להפות בתנור בשרי או חלבי, in a meat or milk oven, מאכל פרווה, שיהיה מותר לאכלו עם שני המינים, a parve food that can be eaten with either of the two, מחממים לפני כן את התנור על החום הגבוה, ביותר למשך חצי שעה, then they heat up the oven for 30 minutes at a very high temperature, כדי לעשותו פרווה, in order to make the oven parve. ורוצים להקל, but if a person wants to be lenient, רשאים לאפות את מאכל הפרווה בלא הכשרה. You can actually cook parve food in your oven even without koshering it, שכן ברור שאין שום אפשרות שירגש במאכל הפרווה טעם בשר או חלב, because there's no possibility that any of the flavor would actually enter any meat flavor would enter the parve food or vice versa, or milk food. If somebody accidentally cooked a milk product into a meat tanur, after the fact, this food is kosher. Because nothing actually entered the milk food just because it's a meat oven. And even if there was some leftover remnants of meat in the oven, and you're worried about maybe there's some vapor would have entered, but after the fact, b'diavad, we're not worried about scent or reach. And the oven requires hechsher with a high temperature for 30 minutes. At this point, it's important to note that a lot of this is because what he's bringing down is because it's minhag Yisrael to strengthen, like we said, the difference between basar and chalab. Let's not forget, however, Shulchan Aruch does say elsewhere that if the oven is large enough, a person can put meat and milk even in the same oven if they're both covered and well wrapped. And we're not worried of them touching. We're not worried about any steam or vapor because they're both covered and the oven is large enough. And all of our ovens today fit that criteria. I'd like to mention to all of our listeners and people that ask me this question that in the past, many cities or towns or villages used to share ovens, and these were central ovens that belonged to the town, belonged to the village, and used to be shared with even non-Jews. So there was even non-kosher in that oven at the time that they put their food in. So what the Jews had to do was to make sure that their food was covered properly, to make sure that there's no steam or flavor that is entering the food. So actually here, Rav Melamed is actually being posek a little bit strictly, more than what is required. He's saying you could use the same oven for both meat and milk, but he is requiring a koshering process in between. It is good practice. It is definitely good practice if a person wants to use one after the other to just leave it on for half an hour to burn anything that might be in there. But I will even go and say that even such is unnecessary, especially according to the Sfaradim. But it is a good practice because we don't want to get ourselves into situations where maybe something was uncovered and then you will have a problem of meat and milk. So therefore, what he is recommending is good, to have a separation between meat and milk. If people want to have two ovens, that's up to them. That is for sure unnecessary. You can use one oven and you can have it for both meat and milk, and just wait a little bit in between by putting the temperature higher before you put in your the food of the other type. Lastly, for today, we're going to speak about microwaves, microgal. And this is, he has a great chidush here in the end, but some people know about this chidush, but it is very important to learn. A person can use the same microwave for both meat and milk, as long as there is time in between them. After that, you have to keep them separate in two ways. Don't put meat and milk on the same plate. So he's assuming that people use the actual glass plate to put food on it. A lot of people don't do this. A lot of people have their own plate and they put food on that plate, and then that goes onto the glass plate in the microwave. But for whatever reason, if people were to put actual food on the glass plate, make sure that you have a glass plate designated for meat and a glass plate designated for milk. And hashani, shelo tikanez ze'ah rabah mechala mikrogal lema'achal hamitchamem. Make sure that there's not a lot of steam that is sitting over there in the microwave, which could happen sometime after a long cook in the microwave. You open up the microwave, there's a lot of steam. Person, because of this reason, shouldn't put food on the actual glass plate. Therefore, you put dairy foods on a dairy plate, and meat foods on a meat plate. And then you take your dairy plate and you put it on the glass plate of the microwave. A lot of people do, very good practice, is to take a cover and place it over the dairy foods and a separate cover for meat to place it over the meat foods. Even though these covers, they do have some ventilation holes along the sides, that's not a problem. Those little holes is not enough for all this steam to escape, enter the walls of the microwave and the ceiling of the microwave, that's going to then emit a flavor into the next food. Therefore, similarly, we can be kovea she'amatzab ragil shemikogal hu chalavi. A person, what he can technically do is declare his microwave dairy. And if he wants to heat up meat food, yanichu ala tzalachat hakura shel mikogal tzalachat nosefet al mishnach acher. He can take his meat food onto a meat plate, put it onto the glass plate of the microwave, and then he can then cover the meat with the this plastic cover, or with plastic wrap, or some sort of, again, any type of cover. You can do this also with par foods. If you have a microwave, here's the big chidush. If you have a microwave that was used for non-kosher food, you have to kosher the microwave, no question. Yeah, you have to kosher the microwave if you want to use it again. However, after the fact, let's say I don't have time to kosher this and I'm starving, I can't eat anything else. You might have a work microwave in your office or in your school or whatnot that is used by people that are not makbid, they're not meticulous on kashrut. You are allowed to put your food in there and cover it. You can just cover your food and cover with plastic wrap, cover with this plastic cover. Even though that there's little holes that the vapor can escape, we are not worried about that. So that's a big question I get asked often about using a microwave in an office. As long as your food is covered, and again, you don't have any other option because you don't own a microwave in your own office, and let's say you got to use a general one. Again, this is all b'diavad. A person shouldn't go dafka look for a non-kosher microwave to warm up his food. Try to get a kosher microwave and use that. But in a situation where it's not possible, then it is possible to warm up your food in the microwave as long as your food is covered. So that actually concludes this parak kafeh of basar v'chalav. We're not done with the laws of basar v'chalav. There's certainly a lot more that we need to talk about in terms of how much time we need to wait. What happens in certain situations where it's very difficult. These are things that we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks. But with that, we are going to conclude tonight's session. Wishing everyone a wonderful night ahead. Be well.